"Take the pretty one," her mother said. But the Alpha King chose the rejected sister. Prologue. The moment Jinnah realized her life was about to change forever, began with her stepmother saying 4 words. "Take the pretty one," Queen Mariette said to the Alpha King who had arrived to choose a bride. Jinnah was used to being invisible, the bastard daughter, the one who was supposed to stay quiet at the back of the room while her perfect sister shined. So when the Alpha King looked directly at her, ignoring Serafina with her legendary beauty, walking right past the pretty one everyone expected him to choose, Jinnah thought she was having some kind of panic-induced hallucination. "Her," he said, pointing at Jinnah with absolute certainty. "I choose her." The silence that followed was so deep that Jinnah was sure everyone could hear her heart trying to escape her chest. "But," the queen began, panic barely hidden in her rising voice. "But when I said take the pretty one, I meant—" "I know exactly what you meant," the Alpha King interrupted, his amber eyes still locked on Jinnah. "And I still choose her." He crossed the hall with determined steps, stopped directly in front of her, and whispered low enough that only Jinnah could hear. Jinnah blinked, trying to process his words, and thought, "Well, this is the end of me." If you love intense wolf stories with destiny and twists, go ahead and subscribe to the channel right now. We post videos every single day, so subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any chapters. And how about we get to know each other better? I'm Maggie Reed, the author of these stories. And you? Drop a comment below with your name and what city you're watching from. Chapter 1. The morning the Alpha King arrived, Jinnah woke up to discover that someone had replaced her hairbrush with what appeared to be a small, angry hedgehog. She stared at the creature for a solid 10 seconds before her sleep-fogged brain caught up with reality. Not a hedgehog, just her hairbrush, which had apparently decided that after 22 years of loyal service, today was the day it would stage a rebellion by tangling itself into a shape that defied all known laws of physics. "Of course," she muttered, trying to work out the worst of the knots with her fingers. "Of course this happens today." Today, when the most powerful Alpha King in the Northern Territories was arriving to choose a bride from among the eligible women of the Southern Kingdom. Today, when every noble family had spent weeks preparing their daughters to be dazzling and perfect and memorable. Today, when Jinnah was expected to be invisible. Which honestly wasn't much different from every other day, but the expectations were at least more explicit this time. "Jinnah!" Her stepmother's voice echoed through the corridor with the kind of volume usually reserved for announcing natural disasters or declaring war. "Jinnah! Where is that girl?" Jinnah winced, gave up on her hair. It was going to do whatever it wanted anyway, apparently, and hurried to open her chamber door. "I'm here, Mother," she called, because even though Queen Mariette wasn't technically her mother, calling her Your Majesty in private made the woman's left eye twitch in a way that was both fascinating and terrifying. The queen swept into view, already dressed in formal attire despite the fact that the sun had barely cleared the horizon. Her dark hair was arranged in an elaborate style that probably required 3 ladies' maids and a structural engineer. And her expression held the particular combination of stress and determination that Jinnah had learned to recognize as, someone is about to have a very bad day, and that someone is probably you. "You're still in your nightgown," Queen Mariette observed, her voice dropping to that deadly quiet tone that was somehow more alarming than the shouting. "The Alpha King arrives in 6 hours, and you look like you've been wrestling badgers in your sleep." "I wasn't wrestling badgers," Jinnah said reasonably. "My hairbrush just has strong opinions this morning." The queen's eye did the twitch thing. "Go to your sister's chambers," she commanded, already turning away as if Jinnah had been dismissed before the conversation truly began. "Help Serafina prepare. Carry whatever she needs. Make yourself useful. And for the love of the moon goddess, try not to accidentally set anything on fire." "That was one time," Jinnah protested to the queen's retreating back. "And technically, the candles were already on fire. But Queen Mariette was already gone, sweeping down the corridor in a rustle of silk and barely contained anxiety. Jinnah sighed, looked down at her rebellious hairbrush, and decided that today was already going about as well as could be expected. She changed into a simple dress, the blue one that had been mended so many times it was more thread than original fabric, but at least made her eyes look slightly less like mud puddles, and attempted to wrestle her hair into something resembling a braid. The result looked like a bird's nest that had survived a hurricane and then been attacked by optimistic sparrows, but it would have to do. The walk to Seraphina's chambers took her through the main palace corridors, which were already buzzing with frantic activity. Servants rushed past, carrying armfuls of flowers. Guards were being positioned at strategic points with the kind of precision usually reserved for military campaigns. And someone was attempting to teach a parrot to say, "Welcome, mighty Alpha," with mixed results. The parrot seemed more interested in shouting, "Crackers or death," at increasing volumes. Ginna paused to watch the parrot situation for a moment, mostly because it was objectively hilarious, and was rewarded when the bird added, "Your face is weird," to its repertoire, much to the horror of the servant attempting the training. Ginna, another servant, Thomas, who worked in the kitchens and had always been kind to her, hurried past with what looked like an elaborately frosted cake. "If anyone asks, you didn't see me. Lady Constance is convinced someone sabotaged her dessert contribution, and she's threatening to duel the head baker." Duel over cake? You've never seen Lady Constance's commitment to pastries. It's intense. He disappeared around a corner, moving with the speed of someone fleeing imminent danger. Ginna continued to Seraphina's chambers, knocked gently. Her sister didn't appreciate loud noises before she'd had her morning tea, and waited. "Come in!" Seraphina's voice called, already sounding weary despite the early hour. Ginna slipped inside and found her sister standing by the window, staring out at the palace gardens with an expression that looked distinctly unenthusiastic for someone who was about to be presented as the prize jewel of the southern kingdom. Seraphina was, objectively, the most beautiful person Ginna had ever seen. Golden hair that fell in perfect waves to her waist, violet eyes that seemed to glow with inner light, features so delicate and lovely that visiting nobles had been known to literally walk into walls while staring at her. She looked like someone had taken the concept of princess and sculpted it into human form with a generous helping of fairy dust for good measure. Ginna, standing in her mended dress with her hurricane survivor hair, looked like the person who cleaned that princess's chambers and maybe occasionally swept the stables. "Mother sent you," Seraphina said, turning from the window. It wasn't a question. "She suggested I might be useful with preparations," Ginna replied carefully, because honesty and self-preservation were often at odds in this palace. Useful. Seraphina's mouth quirked in something that wasn't quite a smile. "She means she wants you here to carry things and stay out of the way while I'm presented like a prize mare at auction." Ginna blinked, surprised by the bitterness in her sister's voice. "The dress is lovely," she offered, gesturing to the elaborate gown laid out on the bed, silk and deep sapphire that would make Seraphina's eyes look even more impossibly violet. "The dress is a costume," Seraphina said quietly, "and I'm the doll being dressed up to play a part I never auditioned for." Before Ginna could figure out how to respond to that unsettling statement, a lady's maid bustled in with an armful of jewelry, and the moment for honest conversation passed. The next hour was spent helping Seraphina into the elaborate gown, which required approximately 17 fastenings, 3 layers of underlying structure, and what Ginna was fairly certain was minor magic to make it all stay in place, while the lady's maid worked on her sister's hair and makeup. "You're good at this," Seraphina observed, watching Ginna work through a particularly complicated fastening with patient precision. "The detail work, I mean. You should have been trained as a seamstress." "I'm trained as nothing," Ginna said cheerfully. "Professional disappointment, maybe. I'm very good at that." "Don't." Seraphina's voice was sharp enough that Ginna looked up in surprise. "Don't do that. Don't make yourself small to make everyone else comfortable." "I'm not. You are. You've been doing it your entire life." Seraphina met her eyes in the mirror. "But maybe today, just for today, you could try being yourself instead?" Ginna had no idea what to say to that, so she focused on finishing the fastenings instead. When Seraphina was finally ready, dressed, coiffed, and looking like she'd stepped out of a painting titled "Every Man's Dream Come True," Queen Mariette swept in for inspection. She circled Seraphina slowly, examining every detail with the critical eye of a general reviewing troops before combat. "Perfect," she finally declared, and the relief in her voice was palpable. "Absolutely perfect. The Alpha King will take one look at you and—" She paused, noticing Jinna for the first time. "Good goddess, what happened to your hair?" "It has strong opinions," Jinna repeated her earlier explanation. "Fix it, immediately. You look like you've been attacked by enthusiastic squirrels." "That's very specific." "Because it's accurate. Go make yourself presentable. The Alpha King will expect all members of the royal family to be present for the formal greeting. And I won't have you looking like something the cat dragged in and then dragged back out again in disgust." Jinna fled to her own chambers, attempted to make her hair less enthusiastic squirrels and more intentional style choice, failed magnificently, and settled for pinning it up in a way that looked almost deliberate if you didn't examine it too closely. The formal greeting ceremony was held in the Great Hall, which had been transformed into something out of a dream. Flowers cascaded from every surface, musicians played soft melodies that seemed to float through the air, and every noble family in the kingdom had gathered to witness this momentous occasion. Ginna took her position at the back of the royal platform, exactly as instructed, while Serafina stood front and center beside their parents. From this angle, Ginna could see how perfectly her sister had been positioned, the light falling just so, highlighting her golden hair and making those violet eyes seem to glow. She looked like a gift wrapped in silk and starlight. And then the great doors opened and the Alpha King entered. Jinna's breath caught despite herself. He was tall, impressively so, with dark hair that fell to his shoulders and eyes the most extraordinary shade of amber she'd ever seen. But what struck her most was the way he moved. Not with aggressive dominance, but with careful control, like he was constantly aware of his own power and determined to wield it responsibly. He was accompanied by a small group, guards, advisors, and one older woman who walked beside him with an expression of barely suppressed amusement. The ceremony followed the script that had been planned for weeks. King Aldrich, Ginna's father, gave a formal welcome speech about honor and friendship, and the great privilege of hosting such a distinguished guest. The Alpha King responded with diplomatic pleasantries about the beauty of the Southern Kingdom and his hope for lasting bonds between their territories. And then came the moment everyone had been anticipating. Queen Mariette stepped forward, her voice ringing clear through the hall. "Alpha King Kaelin," she said, with a smile that looked only slightly strained, "may I present my daughters? This," she gestured to Serafina with obvious pride, "is Princess Serafina, the jewel of our kingdom." She paused, then added with significantly less enthusiasm, "And that is Jinna." The dismissive tone wasn't lost on anyone. The Alpha King's gaze moved to Serafina first, as expected. He studied her for a long moment, and Jinna saw something flicker in his expression. Acknowledgement, perhaps. Appreciation for obvious beauty. This was it. The moment where he would choose the perfect princess, where everything would unfold exactly as planned. But then his amber eyes shifted. Past Serafina, past King Aldrich and Queen Mariette, directly to Jinna, standing at the back trying desperately to blend into the tapestries. And something extraordinary happened. Ginna felt it like a physical pull, sudden and undeniable, as if someone had attached an invisible thread to her chest and tugged. The world seemed to narrow to just the two of them, everything else fading to background noise. The Alpha King took a step forward. Queen Mariette smiled, assuming he was approaching Serafina. "Take the beautiful one," she said smoothly, gesturing again to Serafina with practiced elegance. "She has been prepared her entire life for—" "Her," the Alpha King interrupted, his voice cutting through the Queen's speech. He was pointing at Jinna. The silence that followed was so complete, you could have heard a butterfly sneeze. Queen Mariette's smile froze on her face. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty, I don't think I understand. When I said take the beautiful one, I choose Jinna," the Alpha King said clearly, his amber eyes never leaving her face. "The one at the back. The one who looks like she's trying to become invisible." "But," Queen Mariette's voice climbed toward panic, "but Serafina is lovely, I'm sure. the Alpha King agreed pleasantly. But not for me. He crossed the hall with purpose, ascending the platform, moving past the perfect princess without a second glance. He stopped directly in front of Jinnah, who was fairly certain she'd stopped breathing sometime in the last 30 seconds. "Hello," he said softly, close enough that only she could hear. "I'm Kaylin, and unless I'm very much mistaken, you're the person I've been searching for." Jinnah's brain, which had temporarily stopped functioning, managed to produce one coherent thought. Well, this is going to be awkward. Chapter 2. The chaos that erupted after the Alpha King's announcement was both immediate and magnificent in its absurdity. Queen Mariette made a sound that could only be described as a deeply offended goose, trying to maintain royal dignity. Several noble ladies in the front row fainted, or pretended to faint. Jinnah couldn't quite tell which, with theatrical precision worthy of a traveling drama troupe. The parrot from earlier chose this exact moment to screech, "Your face is weird," at maximum volume, which really didn't help the situation. And somewhere in the back of the hall, Lady Constance dropped what sounded like her entire collection of revenge cakes. But Jinnah barely registered any of it because the Alpha King, Kaylin, he'd said his name was Kaylin, was still standing directly in front of her, looking at her like she was a puzzle he'd finally figured out how to solve. "I think there's been a mistake," Jinnah managed, her voice coming out as barely more than a whisper. Seraphina is the one you're supposed to—" "No mistake," Kaylin said, and up close his voice was warm and rich, with an underlying rumble that made her think of distant thunder on summer nights. "I'm very clear on who I'm choosing." "But I'm the wrong one," Jinnah tried again, desperately aware that every eye in the hall was fixed on them. "I'm literally the daughter nobody wanted. I'm a Jinnah." Her father's voice cut through her panic, quiet but firm. King Aldrich had moved closer, and his expression was complicated. Surprise mixed with something that looked almost like relief. "Perhaps we should discuss this in a more private setting." "Excellent suggestion," said the older woman who'd accompanied Kaylin. She had sharp eyes and an expression of profound entertainment. "I'm Lyra, by the way, chief advisor, occasional voice of reason, an enthusiastic supporter of fate bonds that make absolutely everyone uncomfortable. Shall we adjourn to somewhere less likely to feature fainting nobles and judgmental parrots?" They were escorted to a private receiving room that Jinnah had never actually been inside before, because this was where important discussions happened, and she was definitively not important. Queen Mariette positioned herself beside King Aldrich, her posture rigid with barely contained distress. Seraphina stood near the window looking oddly calm, almost relieved, and Kaylin's advisor Lyra leaned against the wall like she was settling in to watch her favorite theatrical performance. "Perhaps," Queen Mariette began, her voice strained but determined, "we should start by clarifying certain facts. When I said, 'take the beautiful one,' I was, of course, referring to Seraphina, who has been prepared since birth for exactly this type of arrangement." "I don't need preparations," Kaylin interrupted gently. "I need someone real." "Real doesn't secure beneficial arrangements," the queen snapped, then seemed to realize she'd raised her voice and forced herself to calm. "Alpha King Kaylin, I must be frank. Jinnah she's not technically—" She trailed off, clearly struggling with how to phrase something delicate. "I'm a bastard," Jinnah supplied flatly, deciding to just say it. "My father had an affair with a visiting merchant's daughter 23 years ago. I'm the result." The queen was kind enough to claim me as her own to avoid scandal, but everyone knows the truth. The words hung in the air, blunt and unavoidable. Kaylin's expression didn't change. And? Queen Mariette's voice climbed toward panic again. "And she's not legitimate. She has no claim to the throne, no proper bloodline, no training in—" "I don't recall asking about bloodlines," Kaylin said, his tone still pleasant, but with an edge of steel underneath. "I asked for a bride. I've chosen Jinnah. Her parentage is irrelevant to me. But surely Seraphina is more suitable. She's been educated in household management, diplomatic protocols. She speaks 4 languages. She can—" "Mother." Seraphina's quiet word cut through the queen's building tirade. She moved away from the window and everyone turned to look at her. Stop. Serafina, I'm trying to— I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to fix something that isn't broken. Serafina looked at Kaylin, then at Jenna. He doesn't want me. And honestly, I don't want this either. I never did. Queen Mariette looked like someone had physically struck her. You don't mean that. I absolutely mean it. Serafina's voice was calm, but firm. I'm grateful, truly grateful, that the Alpha King has chosen someone else. Because I've spent my entire life being prepared for a role I never auditioned for. And I'm tired, Mother. I'm so tired of being perfect. The Queen opened her mouth, closed it, and looked genuinely lost for possibly the first time in Ginna's memory. King Aldrich cleared his throat. Perhaps, Alpha King Kaylin, you could explain what led to this unexpected choice? Of course. Kaylin settled into a chair with casual grace. How much do you know about the slumbering fate bond? Silence. The what? Queen Mariette said faintly. It's an ancient law, Kaylin explained. And Ginna found herself leaning forward despite her confusion. Older than most pack territories. It states that some souls are connected before birth, bound by destiny in ways we don't fully understand. But unlike typical mate bonds, which activate at first sight or first touch, the slumbering fate bond remains dormant until a very specific moment. He paused, his amber eyes finding Ginna's. The bond only activates when one person accidentally falls asleep on their fated mate's shoulder. Not intentionally, not forced. It has to be genuine sleep born from complete trust or exhaustion or comfort. And when it happens, the person with dominant wolf blood feels it immediately. This unmistakable recognition that their destiny just found them. Ginna's heart started hammering for reasons she didn't quite understand yet. That's just a story, Queen Mariette protested weakly. A romantic legend. I assure you, it's quite real. Kaylin's gaze never left Ginna. Tell me, do you remember the Harvest Festival? 6 months ago in the market square? The memory hit Ginna like cold water. She'd been so exhausted that day. Serafina and her friends had spent hours shopping, and Ginna had been carrying everything because that's what she did. Stayed useful, stayed invisible, carried the weight. Her arms had been aching, her feet sore, her entire body screaming for rest. She'd found a bench near the musicians, just for a moment, just to sit. And there had been someone already there, a man with dark hair and kind eyes who'd shifted to make room for her without complaint, who'd smelled like pine forests and winter air. She'd been so tired, too tired to care about propriety or stranger danger or any of the sensible things she should have cared about. She'd just sat down, closed her eyes. And apparently, at some point, her exhausted brain had decided his shoulder looked comfortable. Oh no, Ginna whispered. Oh yes, Kaylin said. But he was smiling. You slept for about 15 minutes. And when you woke up, you were so flustered and apologetic that you ran off before I could ask your name. But I felt it, Ginna. The bond activating. The recognition. But I didn't feel anything, Ginna protested. I mean, I felt embarrassed and mortified and like I wanted the ground to swallow me, but not— You're not an alpha, Lyra interjected helpfully from her position against the wall. The bond hits dominant wolves harder and faster. For you, it would have been more subtle. A sense of safety, maybe. Comfort with a complete stranger. The kind of unconscious trust that lets someone fall asleep on a random person's shoulder. I was exhausted, Ginna said weakly. You were bonding, Kaylin corrected gently. And I spent 6 months searching for you. I didn't know your name, didn't know where you lived. All I had was a memory of brown eyes and brown hair and the absolute certainty that I'd found something precious. King Aldrich, who'd been listening quietly, suddenly laughed, a surprised, slightly incredulous sound. So the bride selection, the formal visit, all of it, was me hoping desperately that I'd find her, Kaylin admitted. Your advisor mentioned you had 2 daughters. I assumed the woman from the market was one of them. Everyone kept talking about Serafina's legendary beauty, so I thought— He shrugged. I thought wrong. Or rather, everyone else thought wrong about which daughter I'd come for. This is insane, Queen Mariette said, but her voice lacked conviction now. This is fate, Lyra countered cheerfully, which is admittedly often insane, but that's what makes it interesting. Serafina moved closer to Jinna, and when she spoke, her voice was soft enough that only Jinna could hear. Take it. Take the chance to be chosen for yourself instead of your bloodline. Because I've been chosen for the wrong reasons my entire life, and it's exhausting. Jinna looked at her sister, her beautiful, perfect, secretly miserable sister, and felt something crack open in her chest. Then she looked at Kaylin, who was watching her with patient amber eyes, and remembered that moment 6 months ago. The bench. The unexpected safety. The way she'd felt comfortable enough to sleep on a stranger's shoulder. I have questions, she said finally. That's fair, Kaylin replied. A lot of questions. Probably more questions than reasonable. Still fair. And I'm going to need time to process the fact that I apparently fate-bonded with an Alpha King by accidentally drooling on his shoulder in a market square. I should mention, Kaylin said, his mouth twitching with suppressed laughter. There was no drooling. You're just being kind. There was definitely drooling. Maybe a little. And despite everything, the chaos, the confusion, the weight of everyone's expectations crashing down around them, Jinna laughed. It was a slightly hysterical laugh, admittedly, but it was genuine. And when Kaylin smiled at her, really smiled, like her laughter was the best thing he'd heard in months, something inside Jinna shifted. Maybe fate bonds weren't completely insane after all. Maybe being the wrong daughter was about to become exactly right. Chapter 3. The arrangements happened with surprising speed, probably because when an Alpha King decides he wants something, the universe tends to rearrange itself accordingly. Within 2 hours, Kaylin's people had negotiated basic terms. Jinna would travel north with him for a trial period of 3 months. During that time, they'd get to know each other properly, allow the slumbering fate bond to develop naturally, and determine if this connection was meant to be permanent. If either of them decided it wasn't working, Jinna could return home with no shame attached, and a settlement generous enough to make her independently comfortable for life. It was remarkably fair, which made Jinna suspicious that she was missing something important. You're overthinking, Lyra observed, appearing beside her while Jinna was attempting to pack her belongings and having a small crisis about whether the Alpha King's territory had adequate supplies of the particular soap she liked. I can hear your brain spinning from across the room. I'm just wondering when the other shoe drops, Jinna admitted, folding a dress that had been mended so many times it was more patch than original fabric. This seems too easy. Too reasonable. That's because you're used to people being unreasonable. Lyra settled onto the edge of Jinna's bed without waiting for invitation. Kaylin is many things. Stubborn, occasionally broody, has strong opinions about proper breakfast foods, but he's not unreasonable. If he says you have a choice, he means it. What are his opinions about breakfast foods? Deeply held and mildly concerning. He once spent 20 minutes arguing with the head cook about the proper consistency of porridge. It was both impressive and slightly alarming. Lyra grinned. You're going to fit in perfectly. Before Jinna could ask what that meant, someone knocked on her chamber door. Come in, she called, expecting a servant with more packing supplies. Instead, her father entered, looking uncertain in a way that made him seem younger than his years. Father, Jinna said, starting to curtsy out of habit. Please don't. King Aldrich closed the door gently behind him. I'm here as your father, not as the king. There's a difference, even if I haven't been good at remembering it. Lyra, demonstrating impressive social awareness, excused herself with a quick squeeze to Jinna's shoulder. Father and daughter stood in awkward silence for a moment. I should have done this years ago, Aldrich said finally. Should have told you how proud I am of you, how much I love you, how sorry I am for letting Mariette's hurt dictate how you were treated. You were in a difficult position, Jinna said quietly. That's not an excuse. He moved closer, and Jinna saw genuine pain in his eyes. When you were born, I was terrified. Terrified of the scandal, of losing Mariette's respect, of the kingdom finding out their king was fallible and foolish. So I let her make the rules. Let her decide how you'd be acknowledged. Barely, distantly, as if you were some shameful secret we were obligated to keep. I am a shameful secret, Jenna pointed out, trying for levity and not quite achieving it. You're my daughter, and you should have been treasured, not tolerated. Aldrich pulled her into an embrace that was 22 years overdue. But maybe this is the universe correcting my failures. Maybe fate is giving you the life I should have ensured you had all along. Jenna felt tears burning behind her eyes. What if I'm not good enough for it? What if I don't know how to be what he needs? Then you learn. Together. Her father pulled back to look at her directly. But Jenna, if at any point he makes you feel the way I let Mariette make you feel, small, ashamed, like you're taking up space you don't deserve, you send word immediately. I'll come get you myself. He pressed a small pouch into her hands. Gold. Enough to establish yourself independently if you need it. And this, he added a small wooden box, was your mother's. The woman who gave you life. I should have given it to you years ago. Jenna opened the box with trembling fingers to find a delicate silver bracelet with tiny moonstone charms. She was kind, Aldrich said softly. Funny, smart. Nothing like the scandalous temptress Mariette made her out to be. She was just a person who made a mistake with me, and I let her memory be destroyed to save my marriage. Thank you, Jenna whispered, clutching the bracelet. For telling me. For this. Be happy, Jenna. That's all I want now. Just be happy. After her father left, Jenna sat alone in her chamber, processing everything while mechanically continuing to pack. She was interrupted by Serafina arriving with an armful of dresses. You're not taking those rags, her sister announced, depositing the fine gowns on Jenna's bed. Take these. They'll need altering. You're smaller than me, but they're better than what you have. Serafina, I can't. You absolutely can and will. Consider it payment for all the times you covered for me when I snuck out to read in the gardens instead of attending etiquette lessons. Serafina smiled. Besides, I have approximately 700 dresses. I won't miss a few. That's a suspiciously specific number. I counted once when I was bored. It's actually 743, but who's tracking? They worked together in companionable silence, packing Jenna's meager belongings alongside Serafina's contributions. Finally, Serafina spoke. I meant what I said earlier, about being grateful. That he didn't choose you? That fate chose you instead. Serafina sat on the bed, and for the first time in possibly ever, she looked genuinely relaxed. Mother has spent my entire life preparing me to be someone's perfect wife, teaching me to smile at the right moments, say the right things, never have an opinion that might be inconvenient. And I let her because I didn't know how to say I wanted something different. What do you want? Jenna asked. I have absolutely no idea. Serafina laughed, but it was a lighter sound than Jenna had ever heard from her. Isn't that liberating? 24 years old, and I finally get to figure out who I am when I'm not performing perfection. She stood, moving toward the door, then paused. The Alpha King looks at you like you're the answer to a question he's been asking forever. That's rare, Jenna. Don't waste it because you think you're not enough. After Serafina left, Jenna stared at her packed belongings, her small trunk, Serafina's contributed dresses, her father's gifts, and tried to process the fact that tomorrow, her entire life would change. Tomorrow, she'd leave the only home she'd ever known. Tomorrow she'd discover if fate bonds were real or just beautiful accidents. Tomorrow. A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. It's Kaylin, a voice called. May I come in? I promise to stay near the door and be maximally non-threatening. Despite everything, Jenna smiled. Come in. He entered carefully and, true to his word, stayed near the door. He'd changed out of his formal attire into simple travel clothes, and somehow that made him seem more real, more approachable. I wanted to check on you, he said. Today was a lot. That's one way to describe it. Jenna gestured vaguely at the chaos of her chamber. I'm currently trying to decide if I'm having an adventure or a breakdown, possibly both simultaneously. Both is valid. Kaylin's mouth quirked up. For what it's worth, I'm also mildly terrified. You are? You're a complete stranger who's agreed to upend her entire life, based on a bond she didn't even know existed until this morning. That's a tremendous amount of trust you're placing in me, and I'm very aware that I need to earn it. The honesty in his voice made something in Jinna's chest ease. Can I ask you something? She said. Anything. Why does the slumbering fate bond exist? I mean, what's the purpose of requiring someone to fall asleep on your shoulder specifically? Kaylin considered this. The old legends say it's about trust in its purest form. Sleep is vulnerable. You're defenseless, unguarded, completely exposed. Allowing yourself to sleep on someone, even accidentally, means your deepest instincts trust them. It's the soul recognizing safety before the mind catches up. So I unconsciously trusted you 6 months ago. And I recognized you as home. He smiled softly. Which probably sounds ridiculous and impossibly romantic, but that's what it felt like. Like I'd been searching for something I didn't know I'd lost, and suddenly there it was, drooling slightly on my shoulder. I knew there was drooling. Just a little. It was actually endearing. Jinna laughed despite herself. You have very low standards for endearing. Or very accurate ones. Kaylin moved slightly closer, but still maintained respectful distance. Jinna, I want you to understand something. This bond, it's not a chain, it's an opportunity. We get to discover if what fate promises is real. But if it's not, if we find we don't actually fit, you're free. No obligation, no shame. Just two people who gave something a chance and decided it wasn't right. Have you ever known a slumbering fate bond not to work? No, he admitted. But there's a first time for everything. I'd rather you stay because you want to, not because some magical law says you should. The words settled into Jinna's chest, warm and honest. Okay, she said softly. Let's try this. Let's see if fate knows what it's doing. Kaylin's smile could have lit the entire palace. Thank you, he said simply. He left her to finish packing, and Jinna stood alone in her chamber, surrounded by the evidence of her old life and the promise of something new. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, for the first time in her entire life, Jinna felt like she might actually deserve the change. And that was extraordinary enough to be worth any risk. Chapter 4. The departure happened at dawn, which Jinna suspected was partly for practical travel reasons and partly to escape before Queen Mariette could orchestrate one final attempt to swap the daughters. Jinna stood in the palace courtyard while servants loaded her small trunk, laughably tiny compared to the extensive luggage Kaylin's party had brought, and tried to memorize details of the home she was leaving. The slightly crooked tower on the east wing that had survived 3 renovation attempts. The garden wall where climbing roses grew wild because no one had successfully tamed them in 40 years. The stone fountain that made a weird gurgling noise every 3rd Tuesday for reasons no one had ever explained. Having second thoughts? Lyra appeared beside her with the casual stealth of someone who enjoyed startling people for entertainment. More like 47th thoughts, Jinna admitted. I've cycled through 1st, 2nd, and 3rd thoughts multiple times and landed somewhere in the high 40s. That's healthy. Shows you're thinking. Lyra adjusted her travel cloak. Anyone who wasn't questioning this would be either supremely arrogant or supremely oblivious, and you strike me as neither. Is that a compliment? Absolutely. I have limited patience for arrogant people, and oblivious people are exhausting to work with. Lyra studied her with sharp eyes. You're worried you'll disappoint him. It wasn't phrased as a question, but Jinna answered anyway. I don't know how to be whatever I'm supposed to be in his territory. I can't manage households or negotiate with neighboring territories or do any of the things someone in my position should probably know how to do. Good. Jinna blinked. Good? Kaylin has people for household management. He has advisors for territorial matters. He has an entire network of highly competent, occasionally overeager individuals who handle practical concerns. Lyra's expression softened. What he doesn't have is someone who makes him laugh. Someone who reminds him he's a person and not just a position. Someone who looks at him and sees Kaylin instead of the Alpha King. I barely know him. Yet. You barely know him yet. Lyra squeezed her shoulder. Give it time, Jinna. The slumbering fate bond doesn't make mistakes. If it activated, there's a reason. Before Ginna could respond, Kaelin emerged from the palace with King Aldrich. Her father looked tired but was smiling, a genuine expression that actually reached his eyes. "Ready?" Kaelin asked, moving to stand beside her. "Absolutely not," Ginna said honestly. "But I'm going anyway, which seems like it should count for something." "Bravery isn't the absence of fear," Kaelin said, his amber eyes warm. "It's doing things despite fear. So yes, it counts for quite a lot." The goodbyes were mercifully brief. King Aldrich embraced her tightly and whispered promises to write often. Seraphina hugged her and slipped a small package into her hands with instructions not to open it until she was lonely. Even Queen Mariette managed a stiff farewell, though her expression suggested she was mentally composing strongly worded letters to fate itself about this inconvenience. Then Ginna was being helped into a carriage, an actual proper carriage with cushioned seats and windows that weren't cracked, and Kaelin was settling beside her, and the horses were moving, and the palace was growing smaller behind them. "You can still change your mind," Kaelin said quietly as they passed through the gates. "We could turn around right now. No shame, no judgment." Ginna looked at him, at his patient amber eyes, at the way he held himself carefully to give her space, at the genuine concern in his expression, and made her decision. "No," she said. "Let's keep going." His smile was like sunrise. The journey north took 5 days of travel through progressively wilder terrain, and Ginna discovered several important things about her traveling companions. First, Lyra was absolutely terrible at sitting still and insisted on providing running commentary about everything they passed. "See that tree?" she'd say, pointing at a completely ordinary oak. "That's where the previous Alpha King got his head stuck as a child. Don't ask how. The explanation involves overconfidence and a family of very judgmental squirrels." "Did you just make that up?" Ginna asked. "Absolutely not. I have witnesses. The squirrels remember." Second, Kaelin had an inexplicable fondness for terrible traveling songs that he sang with more enthusiasm than skill. "There once was a wolf from the north," he'd warble while Lyra covered her ears dramatically, "who couldn't tell pine from a torch. He burned down his den, then did it again. And that's why we value proper learning, of course." "That doesn't even rhyme properly," Ginna pointed out. "It rhymes in spirit." "That's not how rhyming works. You're just jealous of my artistic talent." Third, the Northern Territories were absolutely, breathtakingly beautiful in ways that made Ginna's chest ache. The Southern Kingdom was cultivated and orderly, farms arranged in neat rows, villages positioned at logical intervals, forests managed and maintained. But as they moved north, the landscape transformed into something wild and untamed. Trees grew so tall they seemed to scrape the sky. Mountains rose in the distance like sleeping giants. The air itself tasted different, crisper, carrying hints of pine and snow even though it was still technically autumn. "It's magnificent," Ginna breathed, watching the scenery roll past. "It's home," Kaelin said, and the pride in his voice was unmistakable. "The North has always been less domesticated than the South. We work with the land instead of trying to control it. That explains a lot about you, actually." "Does it? You picked me instead of Seraphina." "Seraphina is beautiful and organized and predictable in the best possible way. I'm chaotic and awkward and have a documented history of minor disasters. You're also honest and funny and remarkably perceptive." Kaelin turned to look at her directly. "And you fell asleep on my shoulder in a crowded market square, which means some part of you, even if you weren't consciously aware of it, felt safe with me. That matters more than organization or predictability." I was exhausted. "I probably would have fallen asleep on a reasonable rock if it looked comfortable enough." "Perhaps, but you didn't fall asleep on a rock. You fell asleep on me." His expression turned serious. "The bond chose us, Ginna. I don't fully understand why, but I'm choosing to trust it. Trust that there's a reason our paths crossed exactly when they did. What if it's wrong? Then we figure that out together. But I don't think it's wrong." He reached out slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away, and took her hand. The warmth that sparked between them was immediate, undeniable, like touching summer sunshine. "Do you feel that?" "Yes." That's the bond recognizing itself, confirming what it already knew. He squeezed her hand gently. I'm not asking you to love me. Not yet. Maybe not ever if that's not what develops naturally. But I am asking you to be curious, to see where this leads. I can do curious, Jenna said, and was surprised to realize she meant it. They stopped at an inn on the third night, a cheerful establishment called the Dancing Bear that did not, as far as Jenna could determine, actually feature any dancing bears despite the promising name. False advertising, she complained to Lyra while they were settling into their shared room. Kaylin had insisted on separate accommodations, giving Jenna her own space, which she appreciated more than she could articulate. The original owner had a trained bear, Lyra explained, unpacking with efficient movements, but it retired 15 years ago to live with a nice farmer who appreciated its talents. Now they just have the name and vague bear-themed decorations. That's oddly disappointing. Welcome to the North. We're full of oddly disappointing bears and people who sing terrible songs with enthusiasm. Dinner in the inn's common room was a lively affair. The locals were friendly in that aggressively curious northern way Jenna was learning to recognize, asking direct questions about who they were and where they were going with absolutely no pretense of subtlety. You're the Alpha King, one old woman announced, pointing at Kaylin with a chicken leg. I recognize you from your visit 3 years ago. You fixed my grandson's roof after that storm. I remember, Kaylin said warmly. Is he well? Married now. 2 children. Drives his wife mad with his singing, but she loves him anyway. The woman turned her attention to Jenna. And who's this? You don't look like a northern girl. I'm from the Southern Territories, Jenna said. Bit scrawny. We'll fix that. Northern food puts proper meat on your bones. She gestured at Jenna's plate, which already held approximately twice as much food as Jenna typically ate in an entire day. Eat up. Can't have the Alpha King's chosen looking like a strong wind could blow her over. How did you know I was his chosen? Jenna asked, surprised. The woman cackled. Girl, he's been looking at you like you hung the moon ever since you sat down. Doesn't take magic to recognize that expression. That's a man who found something precious. Jenna's cheeks heated, but when she glanced at Kaylin, he just smiled and didn't deny it. After dinner, Jenna excused herself to get some air. The inn had a small garden out back, and she found a bench beneath an ancient willow tree. She was examining the stars, different constellations than she was used to, the northern sky arranged in unfamiliar patterns. When Kaylin appeared, May I join you? He asked. It's your kingdom. I'm pretty sure I can't actually forbid you from sitting on benches. You absolutely could. I'd respect it. But he settled beside her, careful to leave space between them. Overwhelming day? Overwhelming week, Jenna corrected. Overwhelming life, actually, if we're being completely honest. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the inn settling down for the night. Can I tell you something? Kaylin said eventually. Of course. When the bond activated 6 months ago, I thought I was going mad. I'd never believed in fate bonds before. Thought they were stories people told themselves to make random connections seem meaningful. But then you fell asleep on my shoulder and I felt... He paused, searching for words. I felt like I'd been holding my breath my entire life and could finally exhale. Jenna turned to look at him. That's terrifying. Extremely. What if I'm not whatever you felt? What if you built up some idea of me in your head, and the reality is disappointing? Then the reality will be different from my imagination, and I'll adjust. Kaylin met her eyes. Jenna, I'm not expecting you to be perfect. I'm expecting you to be yourself. The person who throws pillows at unexpected wolves. The person who argues about rhyme schemes. The person who's brave enough to leave everything familiar, because fate suggested it might be worth trying. I'm not brave. I'm terrified. Those aren't mutually exclusive. He smiled. Being brave while terrified is actually more impressive than being brave while confident. At least according to my mother, who has strong opinions about most things. I'm going to meet your mother, aren't I? Unfortunately, yes, she's enthusiastic. Prepare yourself for intense curiosity and probably inappropriate questions about our sleeping arrangements. Oh, good. I was worried this would be easy. Kaylin laughed. the sound warm and genuine, and Jenna felt something in her chest ease. Maybe this would work out. Maybe fate knew what it was doing after all. "Come on," Kalen said, standing and offering his hand. "We should rest. 2 more days of travel and then you'll see your new home." Jenna took his hand, letting him pull her to her feet, and tried not to think too hard about how natural it felt. 2 more days until everything changed completely. 2 more days until she discovered if the slumbering fate bond was destiny or just a beautiful accident. 2 more days until she found out if the bastard daughter could actually become something more. But tonight, standing in a garden beneath unfamiliar stars with a man who looked at her like she mattered, Jenna let herself hope. And hope, she was learning, was its own kind of courage. Chapter 5. They arrived at the northern capital on the afternoon of the 5th day, and Ginna's first thought was that someone had accidentally built a palace inside a mountain and then decided to just go with it. The structure rose from the landscape like it had grown there naturally, all stone and timber and architectural lines that worked with the terrain instead of dominating it. It wasn't elegant in the southern fashion, all symmetry and formal gardens. It was wild and dramatic, and looked like it could survive approximately anything the universe threw at it, including but not limited to earthquakes, dragon attacks, and aggressive squirrels. Ginna searched for an appropriate word. Imposing. "It's home," Kalen said, and his relief at being back was palpable. "What do you really think?" "I think it looks like chaos, and I are going to get along wonderfully." His laugh echoed across the courtyard. The palace's inhabitants had turned out to welcome them back, and Ginna was immediately overwhelmed by the sheer number of people who all seemed intensely curious about the southern girl their Alpha King had chosen. "That's Elder Rhiannon," Lyra murmured, appearing at Ginna's elbow. "Terrifying but fair. If she likes you, you're golden. If she doesn't, she'll tell you immediately and in great detail." The woman in question was perhaps 60, with silver hair braided in an elaborate crown, and eyes so dark they appeared black. She approached with the purposeful stride of someone who had opinions and expected them to be heard. "So," Elder Rhiannon said, stopping directly in front of Ginna and studying her with unnerving intensity, "you're the one who activated the slumbering fate bond." Ginna managed. "Yes, apparently. By accident. By fate," the elder corrected. "There are no accidents with ancient bonds." She circled Ginna slowly, like a predator evaluating interesting prey. "You're smaller than I expected." "I'm average height for the south," Ginna protested. We grow them hardier in the north. Do you faint at inconveniences?" "No." "Good. Fainting is impractical." Elder Rhiannon completed her circle. "Can you manage a household?" "No." "Negotiate with neighboring territories?" "Absolutely not." "Cast protective spells or perform ritual magic?" "I once accidentally set a ceremonial banner on fire while trying to light dinner candles. If that counts?" Elder Rhiannon's expression remained perfectly neutral for 3 seconds. Then she smiled. A quick, sharp expression that transformed her entire face. "I like you," she announced. "You're honest, which is rarer than skill. Skill can be taught. Honesty is either present or it isn't." She turned to Kalen. "This one will do. Don't mess it up." "I'll certainly try not to," Kalen said dryly. The elder swept off, and Ginna released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "That went well," Lyra observed cheerfully. "She terrifies me." "She terrifies everyone. That's how you know she's effective." The next hour was a blur of introductions. There was Garrett, the master of arms, a grizzled man who looked like he could wrestle bears but spoke with unexpected gentleness. Iris, the head of household, who managed the palace with military precision and clearly had opinions about proper organization that she was barely restraining from sharing. The head cook, a cheerful woman named Marta, who immediately declared Ginna too thin and promised to fix that travesty. And approximately 40 other people whose names and positions blended into an overwhelming soup of information that Ginna knew she'd never remember completely. By the time Kalen finally led her to her chambers, Ginna's head was spinning. "These are your rooms," he said, opening a heavy wooden door. They connect to mine through here. He indicated another door. But I've had that locked on your side. You control access completely. Ginna stepped inside and stopped. The chambers were beautiful. Not in the ornate, overwhelming way of southern palaces, but in a way that felt organic and intentional. Wooden beams crossed the ceiling in natural patterns. Windows overlooked the forest, offering views of ancient trees and distant mountains. There was a fireplace large enough to stand in, already crackling with welcoming flames. The furniture was solid and well made without being ostentatious. Someone had unpacked her small trunk, arranging her belongings with care alongside the new clothes that had been provided. And on the windowsill, someone had placed a vase of wildflowers, the same frost roses Lyra had given her that first night. "It's perfect," Ginna breathed. "I'm glad you think so." Kaylin hovered near the door, clearly uncertain about proper protocols. "If you need anything changed, furniture moved, different fabrics, more light, less light, literally anything, just tell Iris. She'll make it happen. It's perfect exactly as it is." They stood in awkward silence for a moment, and Ginna realized they were facing a new phase. What happened now that they were actually here, in his territory, starting this experiment in fate? "So," she said finally, "what's the plan? Do we have scheduled getting-to-know-you time? Formal bonding sessions? A handbook I should be reading?" Kaylin laughed, tension visibly draining from his shoulders. "No handbook. I thought we'd just spend time together naturally. Meals, definitely. Maybe walks in the forest if you're interested. I'd like to show you the territory properly. That sounds manageable. And whenever you need space, you just say so. No obligations, no expectations beyond basic courtesy." His amber eyes were serious. "I meant what I said about this being your choice, Ginna. The bond may have brought us together, but that doesn't mean you're trapped. You have complete autonomy here." Something warm bloomed in Ginna's chest at the sincerity in his voice. "Thank you," she said softly, "for being not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone more demanding, more possessive. Stories about alpha kings usually emphasize the alpha part and skip over the treating people with respect part. Most alpha kings are idiots," Kaylin said bluntly. "Power makes people stupid. I try very hard not to be stupid, though I don't always succeed. Has anyone told you that you have refreshingly low opinions of your own position?" "Lyra. Frequently. Usually when I'm doing something she considers particularly foolish." He left her to settle in, and Ginna explored her new chambers with growing wonder. Real books on the shelves, not decorative ones, but actual well-worn volumes that showed signs of being read and enjoyed. The wardrobe held clothes that looked like they'd actually fit, simple but well-made. Beside the bed, someone had left a small package. She opened it to find a note in Serafina's elegant script. "For when you're lonely and need to remember you have a family who loves you. Also, I included the good chocolate. Don't tell Mother I stole it from her private stash. S." Inside the package was an assortment of Ginna's favorite treats from home and a small portrait. Serafina and Ginna together, painted from memory by a talented hand. Ginna clutched it to her chest and let herself cry just a little. Then she wiped her eyes, put on a nightgown, braided her hair, and climbed into the enormous bed that could definitely fit at least 3 people, and possibly a moderately sized horse. Tomorrow, she'd start learning about her new life. Tomorrow, she'd begin figuring out what it meant to be chosen. But tonight, exhausted from days of travel and emotional upheaval, Ginna let herself feel grateful. She'd been chosen, not for her bloodline or training or carefully cultivated perfection. She'd been chosen for falling asleep on someone's shoulder. And that, she thought as sleep pulled her under, was the most extraordinary thing that had ever happened to her. Chapter 6. Ginna's first official morning in the Northern Territories began with someone trying to murder her. Well, not actually murder her. But the enormous wolf that appeared in her doorway at dawn certainly gave that impression. She woke to the sound of her chamber door opening, sat up groggily, and came face to face with a wolf the size of a small horse standing in the threshold, watching her with intelligent amber eyes. For approximately 3 seconds, Jinna's sleep-fogged brain refused to process what she was seeing. Then panic kicked in, and she did the only logical thing: grabbed the nearest object, which happened to be a decorative pillow featuring an embroidered pine cone, and threw it at the enormous predator currently occupying her doorway. The pillow bounced harmlessly off the wolf's head. The wolf sneezed. And then, in a shimmer of magic that Jinna's exhausted brain struggled to comprehend, the wolf transformed into Kaylin, who was now standing in her doorway, looking apologetic. "I should have knocked," he said. Jinna made a sound that wasn't quite a word, more like a strangled combination of surprise, mortification, and lingering panic. "Right," Kaylin continued, quickly grabbing a nearby blanket to cover himself. "I forgot you're not used to northern protocols. We're more casual about shifting forms here, but I should have warned you. I usually run in the mornings and thought I'd check if you wanted to join me, but I realize now that appearing as a wolf without warning might have been alarming." "Alarming," Jinna repeated faintly, very deliberately keeping her eyes fixed on his face and nowhere else. "Yes, that's one word for several things happening right now. He gestured vaguely at himself. "Go find clothes, and then we can start over. With warning this time. And significantly more fabric." He disappeared, and Jinna flopped back against her pillows, heart still hammering. Note to self, she thought. Morning wolves are apparently normal here. Also, the Alpha King has very different ideas about proper attire after shifting. File both facts under things I was not emotionally prepared for. When Kaylin returned, fully clothed this time, thank the moon goddess, he looked genuinely embarrassed. "I apologize," he said, settling into the chair near her window while maintaining respectful distance. "That was thoughtless. In the north, we shift more frequently and casually than southern packs do. We're less formal about clothing immediately after transforming. It's just practical when you're constantly changing forms. But I should have kept a robe nearby and warned you instead of giving you a heart attack at dawn." "It's fine," Jinna managed, now that her heart rate had returned to something approaching normal and her face was only moderately on fire. "Just maybe knock next time? Before or after the shifting, either works. Preferably before. I promise." His expression turned hopeful. "I was going to ask if you wanted to run with me this morning. See the territory, get a feel for the forest. But I understand if you'd prefer to ease into things. Or never shift in my presence again after the trauma I just caused." Jinna considered this. She hadn't shifted in months, hadn't really run properly since leaving the Southern Palace. Queen Mariette had considered her wolf form distasteful, a reminder of what Jinna really was, and had strongly discouraged shifting anywhere she might be seen. But the forest beyond her windows looked inviting, wild and free. And part of her missed the simplicity of 4 legs and unfiltered senses. "I'd like that," she said. "But I should warn you, I'm not particularly fast or graceful. My wolf is completely average. Actually, average might be generous. Functional is probably more accurate. Functional is perfect. We're not racing, just exploring." Kaylin stood. "Meet me in the courtyard when you're ready. Take your time. The forest will wait." After he left, Jinna dressed quickly in the simple tunic and leggings someone had provided, clothes designed to be easily removed for shifting. She braided her hair, took a deep breath, and made her way downstairs. The courtyard was already bustling despite the early hour. Guards were training in one corner, their movements precise and powerful. Servants were moving supplies with efficient coordination. And a group of children were playing some kind of elaborate game that involved significantly more growling and mock fighting than Southern children's games typically featured. Kaylin was waiting near the forest edge, already barefoot, his expression patient. "Ready?" he asked when she approached. "As I'll ever be." Which is to say, not remotely ready, but going anyway. That's the spirit. They moved into the tree line, and once they were hidden from casual view, Kaylin shifted. The transformation was beautiful, fluid, and natural, like watching water change from liquid to ice in one smooth motion. One moment he was a man, the next a massive wolf with dark fur and those distinctive amber eyes that somehow seemed even more intense in wolf form. Jinna took a deep breath, reached for the part of herself she'd been suppressing for months, and let the shift take her. Her wolf was smaller than Kaylin's, brown fur instead of dark, eyes that were more hazel than gold. Average in every possible way. Nothing special, nothing that would make anyone look twice. But the moment forepaws hit the ground, something inside Jenna settled into place. This was right. This was who she was beneath all the pretense and performance and attempts to be acceptable. Kaylin made a soft chuffing sound, encouragement maybe, or greeting. And then he was moving into the forest with an easy lope that suggested he knew every root and stone. Ginna followed. They ran. The northern forest was unlike anything Ginna had experienced. The trees were ancient and massive, their trunks so wide that 10 people couldn't have circled them with joined hands. The canopy was so thick that the ground beneath existed in permanent twilight, creating a mystical atmosphere where morning mist clung to the earth like something from a dream. The air smelled of pine and earth and growing things. Everywhere she looked, life thrived in wild abundance. Mushrooms clustered on fallen logs, birds called from hidden branches, small creatures rustled through undergrowth. Kaylin set an easy pace, clearly not pushing her, occasionally pausing to let her catch up or investigate something interesting. When she stopped to examine a particularly fascinating patch of moss, he waited patiently. When she got distracted by what turned out to be a family of rabbits, who scattered with indignant chitters at being disturbed, he seemed amused rather than annoyed. They crossed streams so clear Ginna could see every stone on the bottom, the water cold enough to make her paws tingle. They passed through clearings where morning light broke through the canopy like sacred illumination, painting everything in shades of gold and green. They disturbed a deer who watched them with calm curiosity before bounding away with effortless grace. And gradually, Ginna forgot to be self-conscious, forgot to worry about being fast enough or graceful enough or adequate. She just ran. By the time they circled back toward the palace, Ginna was exhausted, but exhilarated in a way she hadn't felt in years. Her muscles ached pleasantly, her lungs burned with good effort, and her mind felt clearer than it had in months. They shifted back in a sheltered grove, and Kaylin handed her the clothes she'd bundled and carried. "You're better than you think," he said while they dressed, backs turned to each other for privacy. "Your form is efficient. You read the forest well. Noticed the rabbit burrow before I did, actually." "I'm slow," Ginna countered, lacing her tunic. "You're cautious. There's a significant difference. Speed matters less than awareness in these woods. Running fast into danger is just finding trouble efficiently." He finished with his boots and turned around, waiting until she'd finished dressing before meeting her eyes. "Did you enjoy it?" "I loved it," Ginna admitted, unable to keep the joy out of her voice. "I'd forgotten how much I missed running, being a wolf instead of just thinking about being one. Then we'll make it a regular thing, every morning if you'd like, or whenever you want. No obligations, just an option." Something warm settled in Ginna's chest at the casual way he offered this. Not as a test or requirement, just as something they could share. "I'd like that very much," she said. They returned to the palace to find the great hall in organized chaos. Servants were arranging chairs in a large circle, guards were positioning themselves at strategic points, and people were gathering with the kind of purposeful energy that suggested something important was about to happen. "What's all this?" Ginna asked. "Open council," Kaylin explained, and there was both pride and resignation in his voice. "Every week, I hold sessions where anyone in the territory can bring concerns, requests, or disputes for resolution. It's..." He paused, searching for words. "It's loud and occasionally chaotic and sometimes frustrating, but it keeps me connected to the people I serve. Reminds me that I'm not just making decisions for abstract concepts, but for actual individuals with real problems. You want me to attend? Only if you're comfortable. You can observe from the side, or not attend at all, or leave whenever you want. Whatever feels right to you." Ginna thought about this. She could retreat to her chambers, avoid the overwhelming prospect of watching Kaylin work, but she was supposed to be learning about this place, these people, this life, and hiding wouldn't teach her anything. "I'll stay," she decided, in the background, just watching. Kaylin's smile made her glad she'd chosen to stay. The open council was exactly as chaotic as promised, and Jinnah found it absolutely fascinating. She positioned herself along the wall where she could see, but hopefully not be noticed, and watched as a steady stream of people approached Kaylin with concerns ranging from the profound to the ridiculous. There was a boundary dispute between two farming families that had apparently been festering for 3 generations. Kaylin listened to both sides with genuine attention, asked clarifying questions that suggested he actually understood farming, and proposed a solution that involved redistributing some unused communal land. Both families left looking satisfied, which seemed like minor miracle. There was a young woman requesting permission to establish a new trade route through previously restricted forest. Kaylin consulted with Elder Rhiannon and Garrett, discussed potential risks and benefits, and approved it with specific safety protocols. The young woman's gratitude was so effusive that Jinnah suspected this had been rejected multiple times before. There was an old man who wanted to complain about his neighbor's chickens. This took 20 minutes and involved significantly more detail about chicken behavior than Jinnah had ever wanted to know, including a passionate argument about proper co-op maintenance and the philosophical implications of free-range versus confined birds. But Kaylin heard him out with the same patience he'd shown the serious disputes, occasionally asking questions that suggested he was genuinely trying to understand the depth of this man's chicken-related grievances. "The chickens mock me," the old man concluded seriously. "Every morning they stand at the fence line and judge my gardening choices. Have you considered," Kaylin said with perfect gravity, "that they might simply be expressing chickenly curiosity rather than judgment? Chickens don't get curious. They get opinionated. That's fair. Chickens do have strong personalities." They eventually reached a compromise involving fence adjustments and an agreement that the chickens could visit the old man's garden on alternate Tuesdays, which both parties seemed to find acceptable. Watching Kaylin work, watching the way he listened, the way he considered multiple perspectives, the way he wielded authority with care rather than force, Jinnah felt something shift inside her. This wasn't what she'd expected from an alpha king. This was leadership that was real and unglamorous and deeply, genuinely committed to the people it served. Impressive, isn't he? Lyra had appeared beside her with that uncanny stealth. He actually cares, about all of it, even the philosophically questionable chickens. Especially the chickens, apparently, Jinnah said softly. He took that man's concerns seriously instead of dismissing them. That's Kaylin. He grew up here, you know. These aren't just his people. They're his family in the broadest sense. Every single one of them matters to him. Lyra glanced at her. How are you doing? Overwhelmed yet? Completely. But in a good way. That's healthy. If you weren't overwhelmed, you'd either be supremely arrogant or not paying attention. Lyra gestured toward Kaylin. He's trying very hard not to push you. Wants you to find your own way here, make your own choices. But between you and me, he's also terrified you'll decide this life isn't for you and leave. Really? Jinnah looked at Kaylin with new understanding, watching the careful way he handled each person who approached. He seems so confident. He's an alpha king. Confidence is part of the job description. But underneath, Lyra's expression softened with genuine affection. He's just a man who's hoping desperately that fate got this right. That the person who fell asleep on his shoulder is someone who could actually be happy here. Before Jinnah could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew everyone's attention. A young man, barely 20 by the look of him, was being escorted in by guards. His clothes were torn, his face bruised, and he moved with the careful stiffness of someone who'd been hurt and was trying not to show it. "Alpha King," one of the guards said, his voice tight with concern. "We found him at the southern border. He says he's seeking sanctuary." Kaylin's entire demeanor changed, focus sharpening. "From what?" The young man looked up, and even from across the hall, Jinnah could see the fear and desperation in his eyes. "From my pack," he said hoarsely. "They're going to kill me because I'm different. Because I can't shift properly and they think I'm cursed. They said I'm an abomination that brings shame to the bloodline." The hall went very quiet. And Jinnah, watching Kaylin's expression shift from concern to protective fury, his amber eyes blazing with an intensity that was both frightening and reassuring, realized she was about to learn exactly what kind of man she'd been fated to. The kind who protected those who couldn't protect themselves. The kind who valued people over perfection. The kind who might actually deserve the trust she was beginning to place in him. Chapter 7. Kalen rose from his seat with the kind of controlled movement that suggested he was very carefully not doing something aggressive, which somehow made him seem more dangerous rather than less. "Your name?" he asked the young man, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent hall. "Finn. Alpha King." The young man's voice wavered but held. "Finn Ashwood, formerly of the Riverdale Pack." "Formerly? They cast me out 3 days ago. Said I had until the new moon to leave their territory or they'd—" He swallowed hard. "Or they'd solve the problem permanently." Jenna felt her stomach twist. She knew what solve the problem permanently meant, and it made her chest ache with remembered pain. She'd been called a problem her entire life, something to be managed, minimized, hidden away. "Show me," Kalen said, moving down from the raised platform. "Your shift. Show me what they claim is wrong." Finn looked terrified but nodded. He stripped off his torn shirt with shaking hands, and Ginna saw marks on his ribs, evidence of past mistreatment. The young man closed his eyes, clearly concentrating, and began to shift. But something was wrong. The transformation that should have been smooth and natural stuttered and struggled. Finn's form wavered between human and wolf, unable to settle fully into either. His right side shifted completely. Beautiful gray fur, proper wolf proportions, but his left side remained stubbornly human, creating a disturbing half-and-half appearance that looked painful. Gasps rippled through the assembled crowd. Finn stood there, trapped between forms, visibly shaking with effort and humiliation. "I can't control it," he said, and his voice was distorted, caught between human speech and wolf sounds. "It's been like this since I was 16. Sometimes I can shift completely, but most of the time I get stuck like this. My pack said I was cursed, that I'd bring bad fortune to everyone around me. You're not cursed," Kalen said firmly. He approached Finn slowly, unthreatening. "You're rare. This is called a fractured shift. It happens when someone has unusually balanced dual nature. Both your human and wolf sides are equally strong, so they fight for dominance instead of flowing smoothly between forms. That's a real thing?" Finn's expression, distorted as it was between human and wolf features, showed desperate hope. "Not a curse? Not a curse. Actually quite powerful, once you learn to work with it instead of fighting it." Kalen looked around at his gathered people. "Does anyone here know about Elder Marcus from the Western Territories?" An older woman raised her hand. "The Great Warrior? The one they say could hold partial shifts in combat?" "Exactly. He had a fractured shift. Learned to use it strategically, keep his human mind and hands while having wolf strength and senses. Became legendary for it." Kalen turned back to Finn. "You're not broken. You're just untrained. My pack said, your pack was ignorant and cruel." Kalen's voice held steel now. "And you're not going back there. If you want sanctuary in my territory, you have it. No conditions, no time limits. You're under my protection now." Finn's eyes, one human brown, one wolf gold in his current state, filled with tears. "Thank you. Thank you, Alpha King." "Can you shift back to human?" Kalen asked gently. I think so. Give me a moment." Finn closed his eyes again, concentrating, and slowly, painfully slowly, his form resolved back to fully human. He collapsed to his knees, clearly exhausted. Kalen gestured to one of the guards. "Get him to the healer. Food, rest, clean clothes. And find him a room in the eastern wing, the one with morning sun. Tell Marta he'll need frequent meals to recover his strength." As Finn was carefully helped away, Kalen addressed the assembled crowd. "Let me be absolutely clear," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "This territory does not cast out people for being different. We don't punish those who can't fit into narrow definitions of normal. Anyone who seeks sanctuary here for reasons like Finn's will find it. No exceptions." Approving murmurs rippled through the crowd, and Jenna felt something warm expand in her chest. After the council session ended, Jenna found herself standing in the now empty hall, processing what she'd witnessed. Quite something, isn't he? Elder Rhiannon appeared beside her with that same uncanny stealth everyone in the north seemed to possess. The boy has his father's strength, but his mother's heart. Good combination. He was so gentle with Finn, Jenna said softly, but also absolutely certain, like there was never any question about offering sanctuary. Because for Kaylin there isn't. Rhiannon studied her with those intense dark eyes. You're wondering if you made the right choice, coming here. It wasn't a question, but Jenna answered anyway. I'm wondering if I'm enough for someone like him. Someone who's that good. Wrong question. What's the right question? Whether he's enough for you. Rhiannon's expression softened slightly. Child, you've spent your whole life being told you weren't enough, weren't legitimate enough, pretty enough, perfect enough. But the slumbering fate bond doesn't activate for people who aren't enough. It activates for people who are exactly what they need to be. That sounds like romantic nonsense, Jenna said, but her voice lacked conviction. Does it? Then explain why your soul recognized safety in a stranger's presence. Explain why an Alpha King spent 6 months searching for a woman whose name he didn't even know. Rhiannon turned to leave, then paused. The bond chose you, Jenna. Maybe it's time you chose yourself too. That evening, Jenna was attempting to find her way to dinner. The palace was a maze, and she'd gotten turned around at least 3 times. When she heard voices coming from a partially open door. Completely irresponsible, Kaylin. You can't just offer sanctuary to everyone with a hard luck story. Jenna froze, recognizing the criticism in the male voice even though she didn't know the speaker. I can absolutely offer sanctuary to refugees fleeing persecution. That was Kaylin. His voice level but firm. That's literally part of my responsibility as Alpha King. But a fractured shift? Those are dangerous, unpredictable. What if he can't control it and someone gets hurt? Then we'll train him. Teach him control. The same way we'd help anyone else who needed it. You're too soft. Your father would have... My father, Kaylin interrupted, and now there was steel in his voice, is dead. I'm the Alpha King now, and I make the decisions. If you have concerns about specific security measures, bring them to council. But don't question my judgment on matters of sanctuary. Silence, then. Yes, Alpha King. Footsteps approached the door, and Jenna barely had time to step back before a middle-aged man emerged, his expression sour. He glanced at her, seemed to recognize her as the Southern girl, and his scowl deepened before he stalked off. You can come in, Jenna, Kaylin called. I know you're out there. She stepped into what appeared to be a study. Comfortable chairs, shelves loaded with books and maps. A desk covered in papers that suggested actual work happened here. I wasn't eavesdropping, she said immediately. I was lost. Again. Your palace has aggressive architecture that doesn't want to be navigated. Kaylin laughed, tension draining from his shoulders. That was Counselor Breen. He's been questioning my decisions since I was crowned 3 years ago. Thinks I'm too young and too soft. Are you? Too young? Objectively, yes. 32 is young for an Alpha King. Too soft? He considered this seriously. I don't think protecting vulnerable people is softness. I think it's basic decency. But Breen represents a faction that believes strength means being hard, uncompromising, ruthless. And you don't believe that? I believe real strength is knowing when to be hard and when to be gentle, when to fight and when to protect. He gestured to a chair. You're supposed to be heading to dinner, aren't you? I was trying to. The palace keeps moving, I'm convinced of it. It does take some getting used to. The layout is organic. He stood. Come on. I'll escort you, and I can tell you the trick to remembering how to navigate. It involves landmark recognition and accepting that some hallways make no logical sense. They walked through the corridors together, and Kaylin pointed out various details. A painting of a particularly grumpy-looking ancestor. That's Great-Uncle Theodore. He scowled at everything. A suit of armor that was slightly crooked. Someone crashes into that every 3rd Tuesday. We've stopped trying to fix it. A window that overlooked a specific tree. That's the marker for the dining hall turn. You're different here, Jenna observed. More relaxed than you were in the South. This is home. I don't have to perform here. I can just be myself. He glanced at her. Does that bother you? That I'm less formal? No. I like it. She smiled. Though I reserve the right to be alarmed by morning wolves appearing in my doorway. That's fair. I've added knock before shifting to my mental list of important protocols. They reached the dining hall, which was smaller and more intimate than Jinnah expected. A long table that could seat perhaps 30 people, with about 15 currently gathered for the evening meal. Lyra waved them over. You're late. Marta threatened to feed your portions to the dogs. Marta threatens that every night, Kaelin said, settling into a chair. He gestured to the empty seat beside him. Jinnah, this is informal dinner. No assigned seating, no formal protocols. Just grab food and talk. It's chaos, but friendly chaos. Jinnah sat, and immediately found herself surrounded by curious, friendly faces. You're the one from the south, a young woman said brightly. The one the Alpha King chose over the beautiful princess. I'm Sarah, and I just want to say, that was amazing. Like something from a story. It was mostly just confusing, Jinnah admitted. But romantic, Sarah insisted. The slumbering fate bond. Do you know how rare that is? I'm learning. Dinner was exactly as chaotic as promised. Conversations overlapped. People reached across each other for bread. Someone told a terrible joke about a chicken and a philosopher that made absolutely no sense, but everyone laughed anyway. It was loud and disorganized and completely unlike the formal, silent dinners Jinnah had endured in the Southern Palace. It was wonderful. You're smiling, Kaelin observed quietly, leaning closer so only she could hear over the general noise. I've never been to a dinner like this, where everyone just talks, laughs, doesn't worry about proper fork placement or saying the wrong thing. Welcome to the North. We're aggressively informal. I'm starting to notice. After dinner, Kaelin walked her back to her chambers, partly to help her navigate, partly, Jinnah suspected, because he wanted the company. They paused outside her door, and the silence between them was comfortable rather than awkward. Thank you, Jinnah said. For today, the run, the council, dinner, for not expecting me to immediately know how everything works. Thank you for trying, Kaelin replied. For being brave enough to be here. I'm not brave, I'm just here. That's what brave means. Showing up despite fear. He smiled. Sleep well, Jinnah. Tomorrow, if you're interested, I'd like to show you the library. It's extensive. And has a surprisingly aggressive librarian who I think you'd enjoy meeting. Aggressive librarian sounds intriguing. She once threw a book at a nobleman who was being condescending. It was magnificent. Jinnah laughed, and when she closed her door behind her, she was still smiling. Maybe this fate bond thing was working out after all. Chapter 8. The library turned out to be less a room and more an entire wing of the palace that had apparently been taken over by books who'd formed their own independent kingdom with strict rules about noise levels and proper respect for ancient texts. This is Meredith, Kaelin said, introducing Jinnah to a woman who was perhaps 50, with steel-gray hair pinned severely back and spectacles that magnified her eyes to an intimidating degree. She's guarded this library for 23 years and takes absolutely no nonsense from anyone, including me. Especially you, Meredith corrected. You still haven't returned that volume on historical boundary disputes you borrowed 2 months ago. I'm still reading it. You're avoiding the boring middle chapters. I know your reading habits, Alpha King. She turned her magnified gaze on Jinnah. You're the southern girl with the slumbering fate bond. That seems to be my primary identifying characteristic now, Jinnah said. Yes. Can you read? Yes. Do you understand that books are treasures to be respected, not objects to be mistreated? I do. Have you ever returned a book with food stains, dog-eared pages, or a broken spine? Never. Books are sacred. Meredith studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. You may use the library. Freely. Without restriction. She shot a pointed look at Kaelin, which is more permission than some people have earned. I dog-eared one page accidentally 6 years ago, Kaelin protested. One page. Books remember, Alpha King. And so do I. She swept off, and Jinnah tried very hard not to laugh. She's terrifying, she whispered. She's wonderful, Kaylin corrected. And she just gave you full library access, which she's denied to visiting nobles and at least 3 counselors. You've been accepted. They spent the morning exploring the library, and Ginna discovered it was even more extensive than she'd imagined. Entire rooms devoted to specific subjects: history, magic theory, agriculture, combat techniques, poetry, philosophy. A section of children's books that showed signs of extensive use. A collection of what appeared to be terrible romance novels that someone had carefully hidden behind the dignified history texts. Those are Lyra's, Kaylin confided. She thinks no one knows, but everyone knows. What are they about? Dramatically misunderstood warriors finding love with surprisingly assertive scholars. They're terrible. I've read 3 of them. That's very specific. Lyra has specific tastes. Ginna found herself drawn to a section on ancient pack laws and magical bonds. She pulled down a volume, settling into a comfortable chair near the window, and began reading about the Slumbering Fate bond. The Slumbering Fate bond is among the rarest of mystical connections, the text explained in elaborate script. Unlike typical mate bonds which activate through proximity or eye contact, the slumbering bond requires an act of profound, unconscious trust. When one soul recognizes safety in another so completely that sleep becomes possible in their presence, the bond awakens. This type of bond cannot be forced or faked. The sleep must be genuine, born of exhaustion or comfort or instinctive recognition of safety. Both parties must be open to connection, even if they're not consciously aware of this openness. Once activated, the bond creates a deep empathetic link. Emotions flow between bonded pairs, allowing them to sense each other's true feelings. This makes deception nearly impossible, a feature, not a flaw, as the bond's purpose is to unite souls in complete honesty. Ginna looked up from the book to find Kaylin watching her from across the room where he'd been reviewing maps. Finding interesting information? He asked. It says the bond creates an empathetic link, that we can sense each other's emotions. She frowned. I haven't felt anything like that. It develops gradually, strengthens as the bond settles. He set aside his maps and moved closer. But it's already starting. Haven't you noticed? Noticed what? This morning at breakfast, when Sarah was telling that long story about her sister's sheep. You got bored and irritated, and I felt it. This echo of your feelings. His expression was thoughtful. And yesterday, when Finn collapsed after shifting, you felt scared and angry on his behalf. I felt that too. This surge of protective fury that wasn't quite mine. Ginna thought about this. There had been moments over the past few days when she'd felt strangely attuned to Kaylin's mood, knowing when he was tired, even though he didn't show it, sensing his amusement before he smiled, feeling his concern for Finn like it was her own emotion. It's a bit invasive, isn't it? She said. Having someone feel your emotions? It would be if it wasn't mutual, but we both feel each other equally. Neither has advantage. Kaylin settled into the chair across from her. The book probably also mentions that bonded pairs can learn to shield, keep private thoughts private while still maintaining the empathetic connection. Why would you want to shield? Sometimes people need privacy, space to process difficult emotions without someone else feeling them. His amber eyes were gentle. The bond is about connection, not invasion. Part of honoring it is knowing when to be present and when to give space. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, both reading, and Ginna found herself marveling at how natural this felt. How easy it was to simply exist in the same space without needing to perform or pretend. Their peaceful morning was interrupted by Lyra bursting into the library with her characteristic disregard for Meredith's noise rules. Kaylin, we have a situation. She skidded to a stop, noticed Ginna, and grimaced. Also, hello, Ginna. Nice to see you. Love the library atmosphere. Very cozy. Now, Kaylin, situation. What kind of situation? Kaylin was already standing, his whole demeanor shifting to alert readiness. The entertaining kind that's also mildly concerning. Your mother is here. Kaylin's expression did something complicated. My mother, as in Queen Mother Alara. That mother. Do you have another mother I'm not aware of? because that would be fascinating from a biological standpoint. Lyra grinned. She arrived an hour ago with an entourage of 16 trunks, 3 nervous servants, and an extremely strong opinions about everything. She's currently redecorating the guest wing and interrogating Marta about your eating habits. Oh no, Kaylin said. Oh yes. She also demanded to meet the girl who fate bonded with my son immediately. Her exact words. Very dramatic delivery. Kaylin turned to Ginna, and she saw genuine concern in his expression. I should have warned you my mother was planning to visit. She sent word a month ago, but I thought we'd have more time before she arrived. Is she terrifying? Ginna asked. She's enthusiastic and intrusive, and has absolutely no sense of personal boundaries. But she means well. He ran a hand through his hair, looking genuinely anxious. She's going to ask you inappropriate questions about our sleeping arrangements and probably offer unsolicited advice about everything. I'm sorry in advance. I survived Queen Mariette for 22 years, Ginna pointed out. How bad can one enthusiastic mother be? You sweet, naive southern flower, Lyra said with genuine sympathy. You have no idea what's coming. They found Queen Mother Alara in the main parlor, where she'd apparently already rearranged the furniture and was currently debating the optimal placement of a decorative vase with a bewildered servant. She was a striking woman in her late 50s, with dark hair streaked with silver and the same amber eyes as her son. She moved with confident energy, gesturing expressively while explaining her vision for improved furniture arrangement. And if we move the settee here, the light will be better for afternoon reading, which is essential because, oh, she spotted Kaylin and immediately abandoned her furniture lecture. My darling boy, finally, I've been here a whole hour and you haven't greeted me yet. I was in the library, Mother. No one told me you'd arrived early. Early? I'm precisely on time. You're late for my arrival, which is different. She swept across the room and embraced Kaylin with the kind of enthusiasm that made him stumble slightly. Then she pulled back and examined him critically. You look tired. Are you sleeping properly? Eating enough? Marta says you've been skipping breakfast. I had breakfast this morning. One morning doesn't establish a pattern. I'm concerned about your nutritional... She stopped abruptly, noticing Ginna for the first time. Her expression transformed into something between delight and intense curiosity. You're her. The one who fell asleep on my son's shoulder and activated a slumbering fate bond. That's me, Ginna confirmed, trying not to feel like a specimen under examination. I'm Ginna. Ginna! Alara released Kaylin and moved toward her with alarming speed. What a lovely name. Simple, elegant, rolls off the tongue nicely. Good name for announcements and also for calling across distances. Very practical. She circled Ginna once, similar to how Elder Rhiannon had, but with more enthusiastic energy. You're smaller than I expected. Everyone keeps saying that, Ginna said. It's not a criticism. Small is good. Compact, efficient. I myself am average height and have found it perfectly adequate. Alara beamed at her. Now tell me everything. How are you adjusting? Is Kaylin treating you well? Are the chambers comfortable? Has anyone been rude? Because if anyone has been rude, you tell me immediately and I'll handle it. Mother, Kaylin said with impressive patience, perhaps give her a chance to answer before adding more questions? I'm providing options. It's considerate. But Alara did pause expectantly, waiting for Ginna's response. Everything has been wonderful, Ginna said honestly. The chambers are beautiful, everyone has been welcoming, and Kaylin has been... She glanced at him. Very respectful and patient. Respectful and patient, Alara repeated, her expression suggesting this was somehow concerning. That's good. Very good. Essential, really. A pause. Perhaps too respectful? Mother, Kaylin said warningly. I'm just saying, the bond needs time to develop. Proximity helps. You can't develop a proper connection if you're being overly respectful and maintaining separate chambers and never... Mother. Not spending quality time together in settings that encourage emotional vulnerability and... Mother. Alara stopped, looking innocent. I'm simply expressing maternal concern about bond development speed. It's a mother's prerogative. It's invasive questioning about private matters. Is it private if I'm asking about it publicly? She turned to Jenna. Am I being invasive? Jenna looked between them. Kaylin's mortified expression, Ilara's mischievous innocence, and made a decision. A little bit, she admitted, but in an entertaining way rather than a malicious way. So I'll allow it. Ilara clapped her hands together delightedly. I like you. Honest and funny, and not intimidated by aggressive maternal energy. Kaylin, I officially approve. You may proceed with the bond. I wasn't aware I needed your permission, Kaylin said dryly. You always need your mother's permission. That's universal law. Now, she linked her arm through Jenna's. Let me tell you embarrassing stories about Kaylin's childhood while we take a walk through the gardens. He once got his head stuck in a decorative vase trying to see if it made echoes. Mother, please, he was 14. Old enough to know better. But did he learn? No. 2 months later, different vase, same problem. As Ilara steered her toward the gardens, chattering enthusiastically about various childhood incidents involving stuck heads and poor judgment, Jenna caught Kaylin's eye. He looked mortified but also resigned and oddly fond. And Jenna found herself smiling. This family, chaotic, honest, aggressively affectionate, was nothing like the cold formality she'd grown up with. It was loud and intrusive and occasionally embarrassing. It was also exactly what she hadn't known she needed. Chapter 9. Queen Mother Ilara stayed for a week, and in that time, Jenna learned several important things about Kaylin's family. First, enthusiasm was apparently genetic. Ilara approached everything with the same intense energy her son applied to morning runs and chicken-related disputes. Whether she was reorganizing the kitchens, to Marta's mixed horror and delight, interrogating council members about their treatment of Kaylin, to everyone's discomfort, or teaching Jenna elaborate northern card games that seemed to have different rules every time they played. Second, maternal embarrassment was a deliberate strategy. Every story Ilara told about Kaylin's childhood, the vase incidents, the time he'd tried to befriend a family of raccoons and ended up covered in trash, the phase where he'd insisted on wearing a cape everywhere because he thought it made him look regal, was carefully chosen to make him seem human, approachable. Not the intimidating alpha king, but just a person who'd made ridiculous choices and survived. Jenna appreciated the effort, even if Kaylin looked like he wanted the earth to swallow him approximately every 15 minutes. Third, and most importantly, Ilara genuinely cared about her son's happiness in a way that transcended titles or bloodlines or strategic arrangements. He's been lonely, Ilara confided one afternoon while they were walking through the palace gardens. Kaylin was handling council business, and Ilara had decided Jenna needed proper exercise and maternal bonding time, which apparently meant discussing her son's emotional state in detail. For years, ever since he became Alpha King at 29, too young, really, but his father's death was sudden and the territory needed stability. He never talks about his father, Jenna observed. They had a complicated relationship. His father was a good Alpha King, but not a particularly warm parent. Believed in strength through hardness, emotions as weakness, that sort of outdated thinking. Ilara's expression was fond but sad. Kaylin spent his whole childhood trying to earn approval that was never quite given. And then his father died, and Kaylin became responsible for thousands of people while still grieving and questioning if he was worthy. He's more than worthy, Jenna said quietly. I know, you know. He's still figuring it out. Ilara paused beside a fountain, studying the water with absent focus. When he told me about the slumbering fate bond activating, I was terrified and thrilled simultaneously. Terrified because what if you didn't want him? What if this ancient magic had activated only to show him another rejection? But thrilled because maybe, finally, my son would have someone who chose him for himself. I'm choosing him, Jenna said, and realized as she spoke that it was true. Not just accepting what fate offered, but actively choosing this man, this life, these people. Slowly, maybe, and with occasional panic. But I'm choosing him. Ilara's smile was radiant. Good. Because he's already chosen you, and it would be terribly awkward if the feelings weren't reciprocated. She linked her arm through Ginna's. Now, let me tell you about his adolescent poetry phase. It was spectacularly terrible, and you deserve to know about it. That evening, Alara insisted on hosting what she called a proper family dinner, which meant the three of them in the small private dining room, no servants hovering, no formality. "Tell me about your family," Alara said to Ginna while serving herself an alarming amount of roasted vegetables. "Kaelin mentioned your father is King Aldrich, but the details were vague." Ginna hesitated, unsure how much to share. But Alara's expression was genuinely curious rather than judgmental, and Kaelin gave her an encouraging nod. "I'm illegitimate," she said simply. "My father had an affair. Queen Mariette claimed me as her own to avoid scandal, but she's never let anyone forget what I actually am, including me, especially me. What you actually are," Alara repeated slowly, "is your father's daughter. Legitimate or not, you exist. You matter. And anyone who made you feel otherwise was wrong." The blunt validation hit Ginna unexpectedly hard. Her throat tightened with emotion she hadn't expected. "Your mother. The woman who gave birth to you. What happened to her?" Alara asked gently. "She died when I was an infant. Fever. I never knew her." Ginna touched the bracelet her father had given her, the one that had belonged to her birth mother. "Everyone says she was kind, funny, nothing like the scandalous temptress the queen made her out to be." "I'm sure she would be proud of you," Alara said. "Her daughter, brave enough to leave everything familiar because fate suggested there might be something better waiting." "I don't feel brave. I feel terrified most of the time. That's what brave is, darling. Doing things despite terror." Alara reached across the table and squeezed Ginna's hand. "And you're doing beautifully." After dinner, Kaelin walked Ginna back to her chambers, a routine they'd developed over the past week. These quiet moments at the end of each day where they could talk without audience. "Your mother is wonderful," Ginna said. "Overwhelming, but wonderful. She likes you. A lot." Kaelin smiled. "She's been giving me advice all week about bond development and relationship building. Most of it wildly inappropriate. I'm almost afraid to ask." "Smart choice. Let's preserve your innocence." They paused outside her door, and Kaelin's expression turned serious. "Ginna, we're almost at 2 months of the 3-month trial period. I know. And I wanted to check in. Make sure you're okay. Make sure this is what you want." Ginna looked at him. This man who'd spent 6 months searching for her, who'd defended a refugee with a fractured shift without hesitation, who sang terrible songs with enthusiasm and took chicken disputes seriously, and made her laugh even when she was overwhelmed. "Can I tell you something?" she said. "Always. That first day, in the Southern Palace, when you chose me over Serafina, I thought it was a mistake. Some cosmic error that would be corrected once you realized I wasn't special or remarkable or worthy of fate's attention. Ginna, let me finish." She took a breath. "But these past 2 months, watching you lead, seeing how you treat people, learning about this territory and these lives, I've realized something. The bond didn't make a mistake. It saw something I couldn't see about myself. That maybe being overlooked and underestimated my whole life taught me to see other overlooked people, to value kindness over perfection, to understand that worth isn't about bloodlines or beauty or fitting into narrow definitions. You're remarkable," Kaelin said softly. "You've always been remarkable. I'm starting to believe that." She smiled, feeling tears prick her eyes. "And I'm choosing to stay. Not because of the bond, not because of duty or obligation, but because I want to. Because you make me laugh and feel safe and believe I deserve good things. Because this chaotic, honest, aggressively affectionate place feels more like home than anywhere I've ever been." Kaelin's expression transformed. Joy and relief and something deeper, warmer, that made Ginna's chest ache in the best possible way. "I love you," he said. "Simple, honest, no artifice. I've probably loved you since you fell asleep on my shoulder and drooled slightly on my shirt. But definitely, certainly, absolutely love you now." There was definitely drooling, wasn't there? So much drooling. It was endearing. Ginna laughed through her tears. I love you too. Even though you appear as a wolf in doorways without warning, sing terrible songs, and have strong opinions about proper porridge consistency. Those are all excellent qualities. They really aren't. But I love you anyway. He kissed her then, gentle and questioning at first, then deeper when she responded, pouring weeks of growing affection into contact. And Jinnah felt the bond flare bright between them, warm and certain, confirming what they both already knew. This was right. This was real. This was exactly where they were meant to be. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Kalen rested his forehead against hers. The trial period still has a month left, he said. But when it ends, if you're willing, I'd like to make this permanent. Formal bonding ceremony, official recognition as Luna, the whole overwhelming commitment. Are you proposing? I'm asking if you'd be open to a proposal when the trial period officially ends, because I'm trying to be respectful and not rush you. What if I don't want to wait? His eyes widened. Are you saying? I'm saying I don't need another month to know this is what I want. You, us, this life. She smiled. So yes, Kalen. When you formally propose, whenever that is, my answer will be yes. His kiss this time held no hesitation, only joy and promise, and the beginning of forever. Inside her chambers later, Jinnah found a note that had been slipped under her door. Alara's handwriting. Welcome to the family, daughter of my heart. Your mother would be proud. I certainly am. Jinnah clutched the note and cried. Happy tears this time, the kind that came from finally feeling like she belonged. Tomorrow she'd start planning her future as Luna. But tonight she simply let herself feel grateful for fate's unexpected gift. For falling asleep on exactly the right shoulder. For being chosen when she'd always been overlooked. For finding home in the most unlikely place. Chapter 10. The formal bonding ceremony was scheduled for the spring equinox, 3 months after Jinnah had first arrived in the Northern Territories, exactly as the trial period stipulated. Though by that point, calling it a trial felt absurd. Jinnah had been home for weeks. The morning of the ceremony, Jinnah woke to find her chambers had been invaded by what appeared to be every woman in the palace with opinions about proper bridal preparation. Sit still, Alara commanded, directing operations with military precision. Lyra, the flowers. Marta, the breakfast tray. She needs to eat. Sarah, for the goddess's sake, stop crying. You're going to make her cry, and we cannot redo this makeup. I can't help it, Sarah wailed happily. It's so romantic. It's very romantic, Alara agreed. Also very time-sensitive. We have 4 hours, people. Let's maintain focus. The dress they'd created for her was beautiful. Not the elaborate confection Serafina would have worn, but something simpler and more honest. Cream-colored silk that flowed naturally rather than being structured into artificiality. Embroidery at the hem and sleeves featuring northern frost roses and southern climbing vines intertwined. 2 territories, 2 lives, becoming one. Your sister sent this, Alara said, handing Jinnah a small package. It arrived this morning by special courier. Inside was a letter, and the moonstone necklace Serafina had given her months ago, but now with an additional charm, a tiny silver wolf. Dear Jinnah, I wish I could be there, but Mother is having what she calls difficulties adjusting, meaning she's furious and I'm managing the fallout. Father sends his love and his blessing, which I'm delivering on his behalf. I'm proud of you, for being brave, for choosing yourself, for showing me it's possible to want something different than what was planned. I'm figuring out who I am without the performance. It's terrifying and wonderful. Last week I told Mother I wanted to study historical texts instead of attending another formal dinner. She nearly fainted. Progress. Be happy, sister. You deserve every bit of joy. With love, Serafina P.S. The wolf charm is enchanted. When you touch it, I'll feel it, no matter the distance. So I can be there in spirit, even if not in person. Jinnah clutched the necklace, tears threatening her carefully applied makeup. No crying yet, Alara declared. Save the tears for the ceremony. Strategic emotional timing. The bonding ceremony was held in the forest clearing where Ginna and Kaylin had run together that first morning, the place where she'd remembered what freedom felt like. The entire territory had gathered, hundreds of people forming a circle around the ancient stone altar that had witnessed countless bondings over centuries. But unlike Southern ceremonies with their rigid formality, this felt alive and joyful. Children darting between adults, people chattering excitedly, someone's dog barking with enthusiastic timing. Elder Rhiannon stood at the altar in formal robes, looking appropriately solemn, but with a glint of warmth in her eyes. And Kaylin waited at the center, dressed in ceremonial attire that somehow made him look both regal and approachable. When his eyes found Ginna approaching through the crowd, his expression transformed into pure, undiluted joy. The ceremony itself was beautiful in its simplicity. Elder Rhiannon spoke about bonds and choices and the courage required to trust fate. "The slumbering fate bond is rare," she said, her voice carrying across the clearing, "because it requires something precious. Unconscious trust. The ability to be vulnerable with another soul without fear or pretense. Ginna and Kaylin were chosen by ancient magic, yes, but today, they choose each other with full awareness and open hearts." Kaylin took Ginna's hands, and she felt the bond between them pulse warm and certain. "I choose you," he said, the traditional words carrying weight beyond ritual. "Not because fate demanded it, but because you make me laugh. Because you're brave and honest and see value in people others overlook. Because you fell asleep on my shoulder in a crowded market and somehow that became the most important moment of my life." "There was definitely drooling," Ginna said, unable to help herself, and laughter rippled through the assembled crowd. "So much drooling," Kaylin confirmed, grinning. "And I loved every moment." "I choose you," Ginna said, her voice strong despite the tears streaming down her face. "Because you're kind and patient and take chicken disputes seriously. Because you see people, really see them, instead of just their positions or usefulness. Because you made me believe I deserved to be chosen. Because you're home." Elder Rhiannon bound their hands with a silver cord that glowed faintly with ancient magic. "The bond is sealed. What fate suggested, you have claimed. What magic offered, you have accepted. Walk forward together, Alpha King and Luna, as partners in all things." The cheering was deafening. The celebration that followed was pure northern chaos. Music and dancing and so much food that Marta had clearly been cooking for weeks. People approached in steady streams to offer congratulations, share stories, welcome Ginna officially as their Luna. Finn, the young man with the fractured shift, had brought her a carved wooden wolf as a gift. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for choosing an Alpha King who protects people like me. We need more leaders like him, like you." "You're thriving," Ginna observed. In the month since his arrival, Finn had gained weight, his bruises had healed, and his eyes held hope instead of fear. "Your shifting is better too. Elder Rhiannon's been teaching me control. She says I might never achieve smooth transitions, but I can learn to use the fractured state strategically." He smiled. "She's terrifying but effective. That's her motto." As evening approached and the celebration continued, Kaylin pulled Ginna away from the crowd, leading her to a quiet spot at the clearing's edge where they could watch the festivities but have a moment of peace. "Overwhelmed?" he asked, settling beside her on a fallen log. "Completely, but in the best way." She leaned against him, and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "I keep thinking about that day in the market, 6 months ago. If I'd been a little less exhausted, if I'd chosen a different bench, if I hadn't fallen asleep, then I would have kept searching." Kaylin interrupted gently. "Until I found you. Because the bond doesn't make mistakes, Ginna. It saw what we needed before we knew we needed it. I needed someone who would choose me for myself. And I needed someone who would remind me that leadership is about compassion, not just strength. That being soft isn't weakness." He kissed her temple. "We saved each other." They sat together watching their people celebrate, and Ginna felt the bond between them settle into something permanent and unshakable. Not chains binding them, but roots growing deep, connecting them while still allowing space to breathe and grow and be themselves. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For knocking on that tavern door. Wait, wrong story." She laughed. "For being in that market square. For having a shoulder that looked comfortable enough to sleep on. For spending 6 months searching for a stranger because fate suggested it might be worth it. Best 6 months I ever spent." Kaylin turned her face toward his, amber eyes warm in the firelight. "I love you, Luna Ginna. My fate-chosen, drool-gifting, chaos-attracting partner in all things. I love you too, Alpha King Kaylin. My terrible song-singing, morning wolf-surprising, perfectly imperfect mate." Their kiss was interrupted by Alara's voice. "Time for the traditional northern toast. Everyone gather. I've prepared words. So many words." "How long is this toast?" Ginna whispered. "Last bonding ceremony, she spoke for 20 minutes. It was legendary." "Oh no." "Oh yes. Welcome to the family." But as they rejoined the celebration, surrounded by people who'd become family, Ginna couldn't stop smiling. She'd spent 22 years being the daughter nobody wanted. The mistake. The bastard. The one who should stay quiet and invisible and grateful for scraps of acceptance. And now she was chosen. Loved. Home. Not despite her imperfections, but including them. Because of them, even. The slumbering fate bond had activated in a crowded market square because she'd been too exhausted to maintain pretense. Had recognized safety in a stranger's presence because her soul knew before her mind caught up. And that accidental moment had changed everything. "What are you thinking?" Kaylin asked, noticing her distant expression. "That I'm grateful for exhaustion and uncomfortable benches and the precise combination of circumstances that led to me drooling on your shoulder. Best drool of my life. That's a very niche compliment. I'm a man of specific appreciations." They rejoined the celebration, and Ginna let herself be pulled into dances and conversations and the overwhelming warmth of belonging. She was home. Finally, impossibly, home. And she'd never been more grateful for fate's unexpected gift. Epilogue, 2 years later, Ginna stood in the same forest clearing where she'd bonded with Kaylin, watching Finn demonstrate partial shifting techniques to a group of young wolves who'd come from across the territories seeking training. "See how I maintain human hands while shifting the rest?" Finn explained, holding a partial shift with impressive control. "This allows for weapon use while having wolf strength. It's difficult, but possible with practice." The students watched with rapt attention, and Ginna felt pride bloom in her chest. Finn had become one of their best teachers, working with young wolves who struggled with traditional shifting. The sanctuary Kaylin had offered had grown into a full training program, and refugees with imperfect abilities now came specifically to the Northern Territories seeking acceptance and education. "Luna Ginna!" Sarah appeared through the trees, slightly out of breath. "Elder Rhiannon is asking for you. Something about the new trade agreements with the Southern Territories requiring your particular diplomatic talents, which I think means your father sent another letter." Ginna laughed. Her relationship with King Aldrich had strengthened over the past 2 years. He wrote regularly, visited when Queen Mariette's temperament allowed, and had become genuinely involved in her life in ways he'd never managed when she lived in the South. Serafina wrote too, long letters about her studies, her growing independence, her slow journey toward figuring out who she was beyond the perfect princess everyone had created. "Mother is learning to accept that I'm not interested in advantageous marriage arrangements," her most recent letter had read. "It's painful for everyone involved, but necessary. She's not evil, Ginna, just hurt and scared and clinging to control because it's all she knows. I'm trying to be patient. P.S. Father mentioned visiting you this summer. I might accompany him. I'd like to see you happy with my own eyes instead of just trusting your letters." The thought of Serafina visiting filled Ginna with joy. As she walked back toward the palace, navigating the corridors with ease now, the architecture no longer mysterious, she passed through the great hall where open council was underway. Kaylin was listening intently to an older woman describing drainage issues in her village. His attention was complete, his questions thoughtful, his solution practical and compassionate. He'd grown into his role as Alpha King over the past 2 years. Still sang terrible songs, still took everyone's concerns seriously regardless of how trivial they seemed, still led with his mother's heart and his father's strength in equal measure. But he was confident now in ways he hadn't been when they'd first met, certain of his value, comfortable with his particular blend of soft strength. Their eyes met across the hall, and the bond between them pulsed warm, that constant awareness of each other that had become as natural as breathing. "Love you," she thought, knowing he'd feel it even if he couldn't hear the specific words. "Love you too," came the response, that echo of emotion that was distinctly his. "Save me from the drainage discussion. It's important but also incredibly boring. You're the Alpha King. Boring discussions are literally your job. Cruel but accurate. This is why I chose you." Jenna found Elder Rhiannon in the library, because of course she did. Meredith and Rhiannon had formed an unlikely friendship based on mutual respect for ancient texts and intolerance for nonsense. "Your father wishes to establish a formal student exchange program," Rhiannon said without preamble. "Southern students coming north to learn about unconventional magic applications, northern students going south to study their historical archives. He's asking if you'd coordinate it." "Me?" Jenna was surprised. "I'm not a teacher. You're someone who understands both territories, who bridges different worlds." Rhiannon's expression softened slightly. "You're also someone who sees value in all types of learning, conventional or otherwise. That's exactly what this program needs." "I'll consider it," Ginna said, though she already knew her answer would be yes. The idea of connecting the territories through education, rather than just trade agreements or formal arrangements, felt right. That evening, she and Kaylin walked through the forest together. Their daily ritual, the quiet time where they could simply exist together without duties or obligations. "Your mother wrote," Kaylin said, pulling out a letter. "Your birth mother's family, the merchant branch." Ginna stopped walking. "What?" "Alara's been searching for them. Quietly, carefully. She found them 3 months ago but wanted to verify everything before telling you." He handed her the letter. "They'd like to meet you, if you're interested." Ginna stared at the letter, emotions swirling. "I didn't know I wanted this." "You don't have to decide now, or ever. They understand if you're not ready." Kaylin took her hand. "But they want you to know they've always wondered about you. Your mother's sister kept a journal of stories she wanted to tell you someday." "Stories about my mother?" "Stories about a woman who was kind and funny and made mistakes but loved deeply, who would have loved you if she'd lived long enough." Ginna pressed the letter to her chest, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I have so much family now. You, your mother, Lyra, this entire territory. My father and Serafina finding their way back to me. And now, people who knew my mother? You've always deserved family," Kaylin said gently. "You're just finally getting what was always meant to be yours." They stood together in the forest as evening light filtered through the ancient trees, and Ginna let herself feel the enormity of how far she'd traveled from that frightened bastard daughter who'd believed she deserved nothing. "Thank you," she whispered to fate, to the universe, to whatever force had put her on that bench in that market square. "Thank you for the exhaustion and the uncomfortable seat and the shoulder that looked safe enough to sleep on. Still the best drool of my life," Kaylin murmured, making her laugh through her tears. "You're never going to let that go, are you?" "Never. It's our origin story. Every great love story needs a moment of absurdity. Ours has several. That's what makes it perfect." They walked home together through the forest they'd run through as wolves, through the territory that had become hers, toward the palace that was home. And Ginna knew, with the certainty that came from the slumbering fate bond, settled deep and true between them, that she'd finally found where she belonged. Not because someone had chosen her, though that had started it, but because she'd chosen herself. Chosen to be brave. Chosen to trust. Chosen to believe she deserved the extraordinary. And that choice, conscious and deliberate and entirely her own, made all the difference. The end. If this story touched your heart, if Ginna's journey from overlooked to chosen resonated with you, I'd love to hear which moment stayed with you. Was it the Market Square meeting? The Morning Wolf incident? Finn finding sanctuary? The bonding ceremony? Share your favorite part in the comments. Subscribe for daily stories of fate bonds, second chances, and people finding home in the most unexpected places. With love and magic, Maggie Reed.